theme for the last several weeks. And anybody know who the guy that we've been talking about has been? Anybody?
I'm assuming Joseph.
Joseph. There you go. Joseph. All right. So we started off with this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history real quick for the last couple of weeks. Okay. Oh,
he's down here.
That's it right there.
He's right here.
Okay. So we have Abraham, and Sarah couldn't have children forever and ever and ever. And then the miracle came, and Abraham and Sarah had Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. And so Jacob had 2 wives and 2 ladies that were servants of his 2 wives. He loved Rachel, okay, the youngest, loved her. Didn't care for Leah a whole lot, but Leah was the oldest. So it was disgraceful to the family if Rachel got married before Leah got married.
You heard Laban in the Old Testament. Jacob had to work 14 years for Rachel and got duped and got Leah instead. So long story short.
He's had another 7 years. So eventually he gets to have Rachel also, but he had to have Leah as his wife first. Okay. So Rachel wasn't able to have children. Okay. He has 10 children with these others. And before he has Joseph with Rachel. Okay. So he's all these other children with these. Leah has 6 boys and 1 girl. He had 1 daughter. And then these 2 had 2 each. He has Joseph, and then the last child born was Benjamin, which was the youngest. Okay? All right. So having gone through all that, Joseph was the favored, okay, because he was Rachel's son. So as he is the favored, they give him that coat of many colors, right? That's the Bible school story that you all should know about, coat of many colors. His brothers, the first week we talked about how his brothers were like super ticked, okay? That it was like if I gave Ashton a Mercedes and Morgan got a bicycle, okay? Maybe. Maybe she got roller skates or something, I don't know. And all of these other brothers got roller skates. Ashton gets the Mercedes and is the youngest. Why does she deserve that? She doesn't. But Jacob or Joseph loves her. Jacob loves Joseph more than he does all the others. It's hard to get her name mixed in there. Anyway, so they give him the coats. The brothers are ticked. They're very jealous. Joseph kind of throws it in their face and says, "Hey, look at my new coat. Isn't this cool?" They're like, "Yeah, that's great." No. So they plot to kill him. So they take him out and get ready to kill him. And the brother Reuben comes along and says, let's just throw him in this big cistern, this big hole, and leave him to die. And they say, okay, that's fine. And then somebody comes along and he says, hey, why don't we sell him to those people? And so they do. They sell him to those people. And they take the coat, dip it in blood, take it back to the dad and say, oh. And the dad's almost blind, can't see anything, and he feels it and knows that it's his and knows the blood's on it. And they say, your son has died. Okay? So that's kind of where they've been. Okay, so let's roll. I think there's other stuff I need to get to you for that in a minute. But your favorite all-time movie?
The Game Plan.
Sandlot. Pitch Perfect, Game Plan, Sandlot, Overboard, Original. Anybody seen the movie? Anybody else favorite movie? Chloe, favorite movie? Luke, favorite movie? 1 or 2? Olivia, favorite movie?
I agree with that.
Hunter?
Yeah.
50 First Dates. Oh, what a good movie. Aladdin's my favorite Disney.
Okay,
Oh,
cool.
Yes, I agree.
We went to
All
go
right.
see it together.
So movies, can y'all see? Y'all can see this, right? Okay, so movies show us some of what happens in a character's life by creating a backstory, okay? Which is a way of letting us know some things that have happened to the character before what's currently going on. Understanding the backstory helps make a story more complex, interesting, and compelling, okay? But sometimes introducing these things can seem kind of random. When the dad is in the middle of a chase to find his daughter's kidnapper, and suddenly the movie flashes back. How many of you like flashback movies? Do you like that? Okay, I like them kind of. Okay, to a scene where he and his daughter are arguing in the kitchen, and you want to be like her, and you're like, wait, what? What's that have to do with anything? And you're like going back and forth, right? Okay, so chances are you've also felt that way just living in your own life, right? So, hey, grab a chair, pull up here behind Ashton and Hunter there if you want. So there are moments in our real life stories that make us ask the same questions. Like, what's happening? What's the point of me going through this? So now we're kind of getting into the talking about the difficulties of life, okay? The pain, the struggles, the problems, the things that will be part of our backstory one day. And as we have gone through a few things in our life,
We've had some
Okay.
good vent sessions. Let's put it that way.
and when you look back, that will be your backstory, okay? And some of you have been through some of that already, and you've got a backstory. And some of you are sitting there going, I haven't had anything happen. My life's great. Or, you know, I promise you something's going to happen in your life, okay? And when you're in the middle of it, it is so hard, so hard. And I've shared with y'all some of my family issues that are still happening as we speak. You might want to edit this at some point, but I'm getting ready to go to Brittany's funeral. You know, I see where God, you were using me here. Or you might still look back and say, I still don't get it, God. You know, I still don't get it. So, for the past few weeks, we've been talking about this question. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Today, we're talking about what to do when people make fun of you, when a friend dies, or someone in your family dies, when your learning disability makes everything more difficult, when your parents' divorce is killing you and you don't want anybody else to know about it, when your self-esteem habit, when your self-harm habit gets out of control, like my family's did, when someone you love gets really sick. In other words, the heavy stuff, painful stuff, and real life stuff. Okay, I'm gonna get so sidetracked tonight. I love seeing y'all. I just can't tell you. It's just, you know, it's real tonight. But before we can even, you can ask this question, what do I do? We often ask ourselves why. Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? Why is it happening like right now? You know, why am I at this age in my life and this is happening right now? What's that? You know, difficulties often feel random, pointless, and unnecessary. And I will tell you, when people have died that are close to me, right in the middle of it, I have a really, really, really hard time understanding why it's happening at this point right now, you know, or when things are happening around us. And I could see the other side, that if they didn't and they came through whatever they were in, and they got out of that substance abuse or whatever, and how God could use that as, you know, how many people would be drawn to Christ with that example and with that testimony? You know, that's me thinking, you know, I'm like, God, why didn't you do that, right? Sometimes we see the point after the fact when it's part of our backstory. Sometimes we even see the point in the moment while the difficulties are happening. Most of the time, things that don't feel good seem pointless, okay? So in real life, unlike the movies, our difficult circumstances usually don't get a pretty bow tied on them as we walk through them, right? They just don't. And we find life confusing or difficult, and we can actually learn what we can do by looking to people who have handled similar situations like Joseph. Okay. All right. So we're kind of up to where we're at now. So I gave you the backstory of Joseph. So if you're in your Bibles, you're in Genesis chapter 40. Genesis chapter 40, starting with verse 1. So right now, Joseph was sold into slavery. He kind of moved up through the ranks and was doing pretty good. And he was in charge of a lot of stuff. Pharaoh's wife. Anybody know what Pharaoh's wife wanted? I just want to hear somebody say it.
Man.
What Pharaoh's wife want? She wanted him.
Bible
She
says
wanted Joseph because he was hot. That's right. Like you. No, not that kind of hot. Y'all are just hot from the side. He was hot. And she was like, woo! I need Joseph. So she went and said, I want you. And he's like, no way. Pharaoh would kill me. And that's the one thing he told me not to do. And she says, it don't matter. I'm his wife. And I'm telling you, I want you. So then she made up a lie that said that they had, and they threw him in jail. So when Joseph gets thrown in jail, he starts complaining and fussing and all this stuff, right? No. I don't know how. If you're in jail for something you didn't do, that's kind of where Joseph is right now. Okay? If anyone had earned the right to ask, what's the point? Why is all this happening to me? It was Joseph. Okay? Because he'd gone through all these things we already went through with the coat and the thrown in jail and sold in slavery and put in prison and the wife propositioned him and all that stuff. Okay? So that's where we're picking it up. So Genesis 40, verses 1 through 3. Somebody, a live person, somebody read. Jenny, read.
No.
Jenny, you don't have to wink.
Don't make me.
Okay, Logan, read.
Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. And he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. Okay, so Pharaoh was mad at the cupbearer and the baker. He threw them into prison, which is where Joseph was. Okay? Whatever happened, if Pharaoh was ticked at somebody, he threw him in prison. No courts, no nothing. You're going to jail. Okay? Anybody else? Verses 4 through 8. Can you see?
Yeah.
4 through 8.
The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. And one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker, the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with his own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, why are your faces downcast today? And they said to him, we have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them. And Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me.
Okay, so what happened? What happened? The people had a dream, and they needed an interpreter. So they came to Joseph. Okay, and he's saying, okay, so God gives the interpretation. So I'm going to read this a little bit to you real quick. There's a lot happening here. Remember, Joseph's in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And even in this really difficult situation, Joseph honors God. The men told Joseph their dreams, and with God's help, Joseph told them what they meant. And what Joseph said would happen actually happened. Okay? Does anybody know what happened to the cupbearer? Anybody?
He was angry.
He was okay, and the chef got eaten to death by birds.
Very good. So the cupbearer was restored to his position, okay? And the baker was told that he was going to die, and he died, okay? Over time, as Joseph was waiting in jail, he thought that the cupbearer, after he had been told that and given that favorable dream, and seeing that the baker had gotten killed, that the cupbearer would go to who? Who would you think the cupbearer would go to when he got out of jail and was restored to his position? Who would he tell? Pharaoh, right? And Joseph would be restored back to his position. No. He spent another 2 more years, okay? And probably was tempted to wonder, what's the point? It didn't help my life get better at all. Has God forgotten about me? I thought I did what was right, and I'm still sitting here for another 2 years in jail, right? 2 years later, guess who has a dream? Pharaoh. Pharaoh has a dream, okay? And it's troubling him. And he's desperately, oh baby, oh baby. He desperately searched for someone on his staff who could interpret them. Nobody could interpret him. And that's when the cupbearer was like, oh yeah, 2 years ago when I was in prison, he was like, I remember Joseph is the one that told me, interpreted my dream. So why don't you go to him? So Pharaoh called for Joseph, who interpreted the dream with incredible accuracy. And as a result, eventually, Joseph was made second in charge of all of Egypt. Pharaoh, slave boy that was almost killed, that was thrown in a cistern, that his brothers hated, that he got thrown in prison, that the wife of Pharaoh lied about. Pharaoh, Joseph. Pharaoh, Joseph. Under Joseph's leadership, Egypt survived a terrible famine, which eventually put Egypt in a position to save Joseph's family and other people from his homeland who were suffering. It was a full 2 years before the cupbearer even remembered Joseph. And even when Joseph was promoted to that position, he was still living as a foreigner in a foreign land. So it wasn't like Joseph was able to go home as a free man. And Joseph was still second in the command under Pharaoh, which meant that if Pharaoh was having a bad day, guess what? Back to prison or chopped your head off or whatever, right? So this did not make Joseph's life perfect, even though you would think second in command, he's got, everything that he ever would want. Not even close. But if you step back and see the big picture and understand the context, we see that Joseph's challenging circumstances uniquely position him to do something great, something that only Joseph, coming from where he came from, something that only he could do. Okay? So Joseph still had to wait 2 years. All the good things that have happened in Joseph's life didn't make those bad things okay. Being promoted to second in command didn't undo the challenges that he faced leading up to that. But at the same time, those circumstances positioned him and all that again. Okay? And the same is true for you and me. Hard things can happen in your life. Okay? So let's kind of pull it back to us now. It's important to remember that just because something happens doesn't mean it was something God did to you or wanted for you. And that's super hard. In my life, it's hard to step back and say, because God's in control, right? How can you let this happen? Like my brother's asking right now, right? How can you let this happen? Because of sin, things happen. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make it okay. People hurt every day. People hurt each other every day. They create systems of hurt. And as you've lived through the past month, you have seen people hurting. You've seen people creating hurt. You've seen people trying to help and people feeling helpless. Okay? And I have been all 4 of those almost every time I look at the news or I talk to someone about a situation or I'm just quiet and praying. Sometimes I don't know which way is the way that I should pray. And I always come back to God, this is you. God, help me. Help me be what you want me to be where I'm at. Okay? Remember, God is really good at doing the impossible. Really good at doing the impossible. Romans 8:28, anybody know that from heart? And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Okay, so it may not seem to make things any better or all better, and it may not even make sense yet, but God is in the business of taking our hurts, our difficulties, and our pains and redeeming them. Okay, that means even if it was done in evil or meant for evil in our lives, he's going to use it for good. Does that mean that at age 54, once I feel like that I've conquered this and God's used this and he's got me to here, that it's just going to keep going from there? No way. Okay, David's message Sunday was like, how many of the disciples, the apostles, were killed? 11 out of the 12. I don't know. It was a crazy number. And just because you're living for Christ doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to go perfect. It may not seem like things are all better, might not even make sense, but God is in the business of taking our hurt, difficulties, and pains and redeeming them. When you don't know what to do, remember that your problems can position you for a purpose. The hardest and worst things we experience aren't the end of our story or end of us or our story. In fact, they could be part of something more. Have you been in a situation that you've gone through something, and the sun's getting ready to hit me right now, and I'm going to feel what you're feeling. Have you, in your years that you've lived right now, have you gone through something and then later, a year or two or 6 months later, somebody else went through that exact same thing and you were able to be there for them because you went through it, not that you had the answers, but that you could at least be there with them and it's made a difference? Some of you are shaking your heads. And that's part of it. Part of the times we go through things so that we can be Christ for others around us. And we can be that help or that encouragement or just be there for them. Remember, no one else has your life story. You're living your life story. Nobody else has it. Okay? Your difficult circumstances aren't fun, but they're your difficult circumstances. Okay? They put you in a position for you to be able to learn and grow and discover like nobody else can. And God's using your tough stuff in ways that he's not using it in anybody else. The next thing, remember that your story can interact with other people. Although no one else has your life story, when you go through family drama, you can help people who are going through family drama. When you go through a hard breakup, you can understand how someone else feels when they're going through that, right? And it can go on and on and on. All right, so I'm going to close with this. You can become a person who looks around and sees other people's struggles and says, oh, you feel that? Me too. Oh, you've experienced that? I've been there too. Let me tell you about my experience. And then you can create that bond. You can create that dialogue and that discussion. And share your struggles. Share your ways God was with you. Share your ways that maybe somebody else came alongside you and kind of walked with you through those hard times. Okay? Sorry, I touched you. Okay. Joseph went through pain that felt pointless. Joseph went through pain that felt pointless. God took his impossibly bad situation and used it to create unimaginable good down the road. What if God used your painful situation to position you for something amazing that you haven't even imagined yet? It might be tomorrow. It may be for your kids. It may be for some of your kids' friends. Okay? And what if the first step is simply just asking for help? Or simply just, seeing who's around you and talking to someone. Crying out to God. So many scriptures where pillars of our faith in the Bible have cried out to God. Why? God help me. God show me. God be with me. God use me. I don't understand why I'm here. Use me anyway. Help me. Let me be that blessing to somebody. There's so many ways that God can use you in whatever your each unique situation is. Okay? I'm going to pray. And then if we want to share anything else together, we can share. Okay? Anybody want to share anything right now? Thoughts? Okay. Thank God it is.